In the immortal words of Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula in Todd Browning's 1931 film Dracula, I bid you welcome to episode 58 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for joining me on this Monday night here in New York. If you're checking out episode 58 on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Or if you prefer the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and the other platforms, if you haven't done so already and you're enjoying the content, click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. So I'm going to talk about one of my favorite movies, a terrific franchise, but one of my favorite individual movies, and that is Bob Zemeckis' 1985 classic, Back to the Future. And certainly there's a lot of information about the film on the internet and in various publications, and many of you who are fans know that Eric Stoltz, terrific actor in his own right, good career, was originally cast as the lead, Marty McFly. Now, the production team, it was MCA Universal, and Steven Spielberg was kind of the executive in charge of production through his company, which this was years before DreamWorks, was Amblin Entertainment. And Bob Gale was the other coordinating producer, and Robert Zemeckis, the filmmaker. Zemeckis was kind of like Spielberg's protege, if you will. I know that's sort of a cliche, but it's true. It was his protege. Spielberg just loved Zemeckis' talent, and hey, Zemeckis has had the career to justify Spielberg's faith in him. But some of the information, and there's deleted scenes with Eric Stoltz as Marty, and some of the sequences. There are a couple of shots in the finished film where it might actually still be Eric Stoltz that they didn't actually reshoot with Michael J. Fox. There are definitely some shots of Doc Brown from the original Twin Pines Mall sequence where that was from the Eric Stoltz shoot. There are just slight differences in Doc's hair and makeup and presentation, but it doesn't really matter. We all love the movie anyhow. But some of the information that you might find on the internet seems to suggest that Eric Stoltz was the first choice for Marty McFly. And they went to Michael J. Fox because it wasn't working out with Stoltz. Now that part is true, that Eric Stoltz had an entirely different take on the character, and his processing of the narrative was totally different than anybody that I've ever either spoken to or had conversations with about the film. He saw the movie almost as a tragedy, or maybe he did see it as a tragedy, that he was seeing it as an existential crisis playing out in the form of a science fiction film. And the way he interpreted the ending, I've never imagined, I never conceived of it the way that he did. He saw the ending as not a happy ending. What? Because the people in his life are now complete strangers to him. He missed everything, and now he's living with complete strangers. All right, I guess. I mean, technically that's true, but I have never seen the ending of Back to the Future 1985 as anything other than a masterstroke first, but triumphant. How can I see it as bad? Greek tragedy. This is horrible. It's so dark. What? The true story, though, and there are, again, sources that sort of corroborate this, but Michael J. Fox's autobiography goes into a lot of detail about this crazy process that ended up with Eric Stoltz in the lead role. So Michael J. Fox was already, at the time that Back to the Future was even on the boards for Steven Spielberg and ultimately the head of MCA Universal, Sid Sheinberg, Michael J. Fox was on a super successful NBC show called Family Ties, which, neither here nor there, it was my favorite show growing up. I wasn't really that into sitcoms, but I latched onto that show pretty early in its run. And that and The Cosby Show were part of, even with Friends in the 90s, the vaunted Thursday night lineup of NBC, which in later years included shows like LA Law, another show, not a sitcom, that I really enjoyed. But Family Ties, the original conception of the show, it's about 60s radicals now living in suburbia with 3 children. And the parents were played by 2 terrific actors, Michael Gross and Meredith Baxter, who at the time was Meredith Baxter Burney. She was married to David Burney. They had done a famous show, Bridget Loves Burney, back, I guess it was in the 70s. But Michael J. Fox was cast as the eldest child of these 60s radicals, where you get the idea they may have done some illegal shit and somebody could still be looking for them. Radicals, progressive, liberals, not making judgments either way, but the character that Michael played, Alex P. Keaton, is a young Republican and believes that Ronald Reagan is God. He's essentially a huge, likable character. Don't get me wrong. He's not portrayed as a troll, but the show takes him very seriously in terms of his philosophies of life. The idea, though, is that the first season of Family Ties focused on the parents. Michael Gross's character's job is Stephen Keaton. The job, are they going to have another kid? Justine Bateman as the middle sister, Tina Yothers as the younger sister. There's all this family stuff, but the focus of the show is on the parents in season 1. The show was not doing well in the ratings. Michael J. Fox, nominated for an Emmy for supporting actor, wins it. The showrunner, Gary David Goldberg, and presumably the bosses at large at NBC realized they had a gold mine with this kid. Where the hell did he come from? He's phenomenal. He's incredible. So they do something which isn't done that often, whether it's network television, whether it's, streaming, it doesn't really matter. They changed the focus of the show. They took the kid, the eldest child, who was supposed to be kind of a quirky, funny, wink, wink supporting character, and suddenly the show focused on him. After season 1, it becomes the Alex P. Keaton show. And Michael J. Fox, as the engine driving that show, he won 3 consecutive Emmys for Best Actor in a Comedy. That is how much of a home run hitter he was on that show. So that Michael J. Fox is who Spielberg and Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis, Gale was Spielberg's producing partner, and Zemeckis was kind of Spielberg's, as we say, protege. That's who they were going for. But Gary David Goldberg, the producer of Family Ties, and it's not like they were just screwing around. He was working a full schedule from Goldberg, the cast, and Michael J. Fox. They were working a normal week. And in the time that they wanted to do Back to the Future, Gary David Goldberg would not release Michael J. Fox for the amount of time it would take to shoot that film. He wasn't going to put Family Ties on hiatus. They couldn't shoot around him because he wasn't a supporting character. He was the star. Begging, pleading. Goldberg would not even give Michael J. Fox the script. He said, if I give the kid the script, he's going to want to do this. He's going to want to work 90 or 100-hour weeks. He's going to burn out. I'm sorry. Mr. Spielberg, I love you. I love your work. I can't do this. So they went to Plan B. From Universal, from top to bottom, Spielberg, they went to Plan B. And Plan B was Eric Stoltz, who was a rising star in his own right and has ended up having, a solid career, nothing like Michael J. Fox. And he was in the movie Mask, which I think was in production or about to start production when all of this stuff with Back to the Future was going on. Now, Mask, if you didn't know it was Eric Stoltz, you wouldn't know it was Eric Stoltz because he's buried under prosthetics as Rocky Dennis. Cher did the heavy lifting in that film, and she's terrific. She plays the mom. Sam Elliott is in it. He's great. Very good movie. Peter Bogdanovich. Peter Bogdanovich plays the therapist in The Sopranos, just for reference, which, as we know, has just celebrated its 25th anniversary. But they go with Eric Stoltz in the lead as Marty McFly. And they shoot, depending on reports, and nobody really knows if they know the exact number of shooting days. What I've read and what I've seen and absorbed, something like 6 weeks solid. So a lot of material was shot with Eric Stoltz. And it just wasn't working. It wasn't working. And it wasn't only Spielberg. It was everybody in the production. They were having issues. And even some of the actors, Leah Thompson doesn't have an axe to grind with Eric Stoltz. She worked with him in other John Hughes films, Some Kind of Wonderful. So they knew of each other. And Thomas F. Wilson, who plays Biff, Stoltz was like a method actor. This was not a movie for method acting. He was playing Marty McFly in this crazy science fiction scenario as if it's an existential crisis, rather than the screwball comedy with very high stakes, with very serious life-altering stakes, but screwball comedy. Cary Grant bringing up Baby, The Awful Truth, that kind of stuff. Stoltz didn't have the right take on the character. And I can only imagine the frustration, because the producers and the actors in the film were quite confident that this is a great script. We have the pieces in place, the locations, the costuming, everything is in place for a great science fiction comedy. He's just not the right actor, because it's not funny. He's not getting the laughs. And they didn't know what to do, because they were already so far in. Is it too late? What do we do? Spielberg made a personal appeal. I don't know if he actually visited Gary David Goldberg or talked to him on the phone or sent him a series of faxes. Remember, it's the mid-1980s. I'm not sure the mechanics of it. But he pretty much begged and pleaded. Can we give the script to Michael? Maybe he won't want to do it. Can we at least say we tried? It's not working out. I love Eric Stoltz. It's not working out. He's even butting heads with some of the cast members, which doesn't make sense. Can we give the script to Michael? Please, Gary, please. We guarantee you we'll put it in writing that Family Ties will be the priority. We'll shoot around your schedule and as he can do it physically. Because Fox was still very young at the time. This is not like asking 70-year-old, Robert De Niro or Joe Pesci in The Irishman to sit in a makeup chair, and Scorsese says, you know what, let's do CGI. I don't want these guys to be uncomfortable for hours every single day. Fox was still very young. His health was good. So Gary David Goldberg, against his better judgment, said, all right, I'll give the kid the script. Give Fox the script. Not surprisingly, holy shit, I heard about this. I wanted this role. That kind of thing. So they sign. And then Spielberg is put in the terrible position, which nobody in any business, I shouldn't say nobody, most normal, non-trollish people, you don't like to fire somebody. And Eric Stoltz was going to make his money. I'm sure it was in his contract, pay or play kind of thing. Or if you get replaced, just because we feel like another person can do it better, you're going to get paid. But they had to tell Eric Stoltz, we can't go forward with you in the lead, we're sorry. Or words to that effect. So Michael J. Fox came in and they reshot everything that had come before. And one thing that many of you have seen on YouTube is a comparison of the moment where Marty McFly sees his dad in the diner in 1955. And the angles, the shot is identical. And the look on the face isn't that much different. But if you study it, Michael J. Fox has the screwball comedy look on his face in that moment when he realizes he's sitting next to his dad. And Eric Stoltz does not have the same kind of look. Eric Stoltz has a more of a general look of horror, which I guess they weren't going for that. Now, you could get laughs that way, but the idea was he looks the part, but he's not coming across the way that we need him to. So Michael J. Fox, who, as we know, developed Parkinson's and we don't know how he's doing day to day, but it's possible that the crazy work schedule that he was pulling, and this is all true and verifiable. There was a documentary, which I haven't seen, which I hear is terrific, called Still on Apple Plus, about Michael J. Fox. And they get into the madness, the insanity of the schedule that he had to keep while shooting Family Ties and Back to the Future concurrently, where they had like a cot for him to try to catch an hour here or 2 hours there while all this was going on. So he was working a schedule that was almost inhuman. And maybe it sped up the development, because he was probably always going to get Alzheimer's. He had Parkinson's, not Alzheimer's. But the genetic marker presumably was always there. But he wasn't very old. He started showing symptoms while shooting Doc Hollywood in the fall of 1990. He was still in his 20s, for crying out loud. But at the time of Back to the Future, his health seemed perfectly fine. And so they shot the movie. They weren't probably sure, do we have to redo everything? And there are certain fragments from the original shoot that were left in the film. There were a couple of shots of Doc Brown during the Twin Pines Mall sequence, which were from the Eric Stoltz shoot. And there are probably other moments in the film because, like with any major Hollywood film, if the first unit isn't there, it doesn't really matter. So in other words, there could be shots of Biff and his guys from the Eric Stoltz shoot if they happen to shoot that. It doesn't matter. The movie is still great regardless of how you look at it. So they went ahead and they shot the movie, and now everyone on the production side and the actors felt this is clicking. We are really nailing this. You know, people watching the dailies, even those who weren't involved in every scene, just think of there's a lot of this movie where, for example, Thomas F. Wilson as Biff is not involved in the scenes. There's huge chunks of the movie, even where Crispin Glover, where Marty is just doing his own thing. There's a lot of stuff where it's just Michael J. Fox, but the cast, the crew, they're all checking out the dailies, especially the crew, and presumably the studio is getting the dailies as it's possible to ship it. Nowadays, everything could be done digitally. You could shoot something, and in a couple of seconds, you could digitally transmit the footage, the raw footage, and just check it out that way. But the mood was very upbeat now that they got the actor they wanted all along in the role he was born to play. Michael J. Fox was born to play Marty McFly, in the same way that Christopher Reeve was always going to be Superman. Clint Eastwood was always going to be Harry Callahan. There are just certain actors. You want to say Hugh Jackman was destined to be Wolverine. There are certain actors that are such a perfect match where their skills and the character, it's just like Nirvana. It's movie Nirvana. It's like, wow, this is incredible. So everybody was getting that sense. Spielberg was excited. And Spielberg now, he's a little old guy, whatever. Same with Scorsese, Coppola. Spielberg was still in his 30s. He was still a young man. He was, how old was he, 37? At the time that Back to the Future, remember, he got his start. Jaws, his first big film, 1975. He's 25 years old when he got that gig. You want to talk about a whiz-bang, a fucking genius from the perspective of cinematic wizardry? Steven Spielberg. Getting that gig, that literary property at such a young age, and the studio was over the moon that they were able to get him. That's how highly esteemed he was within the industry just for his technical craftsmanship. He was doing shit with the camera nobody had conceived of. And part of it was he never saw a play. He only thought in terms of cinema. Even he did do a little bit of TV with Rod Serling, he did that famous with Joan Crawford. He was like 21 years old. But point is that Spielberg at the time of Back to the Future was not a graybeard. He was a guy in his 30s. In most cases, people aren't even at the level where they're directing their own films when they're that age. At the studio level, I mean, this kind of big budget. But he was excited, and they were trying to come up with a title. They didn't actually, at that time, know for 100% certain. There were some issues from the studio level. And they got a memo. They may have always wanted it to be Back to the Future. Spielberg may have always thought it was Back to the Future. The name Back to the Future may have been on the script that everybody read. But MCA Universal Chairman Sid Sheinberg, who was going through some other issues with Terry Gilliam's Brazil, his mind may have been elsewhere, Sid Sheinberg had an idea for a title that was not Back to the Future. So if you remember, for many of you who have seen the film, there's a scene in the movie where Marty surprises, he needs to get Dad on board with asking Lorraine to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. And Crispin Glover's so good as George McFly. He's so good. He sells it beautifully. He doesn't want to do it. He's not going to do it. I'm not asking her to the dance tonight. You or anybody on this planet will make me change my mind. So he shows up, and Marty does this whole thing. He pretends to be Mr. Spock. I'm from the planet Vulcan. And George has a comic called Spaceman from Pluto. And I think it was George. It could have been the kid at the beginning. Now that I'm thinking about it, either one. Point is, in the world of the movie, whether it was the scene where Old Man Peabody takes a crack at Marty when he basically fucks up his barn. And it's the kid with not a comic book, a science fiction magazine, Spaceman from Pluto. MCA Universal head, Sid Sheinberg. That's the title that he wanted for Back to the Future. He was obsessed with the title, Spaceman from Pluto. So Sheinberg sent a memo to the production team. He had seen the dailies, and he was very excited about the film. He wasn't criticizing. And Sheinberg was the kind of guy who was a real tough screw. He was a tough guy. I actually met Sid Sheinberg at a movie premiere in 2000. A guy that I was affiliated with, a literary agent that we both had dealings with, made a movie called Playing Mona Lisa, and Sheinberg was one of the producers of that film, and seemed like a nice enough guy, but he was really rough, from what I can gather. At least, when people tell stories of him, and Terry Gilliam probably, he didn't really have much good to say about the way MCA Universal handled Brazil. But in this instance, Sheinberg sends a memo to Steven Spielberg saying, how's it going on Spaceman from Pluto? That's my preferred title, Spaceman from Pluto. Now, Spielberg had a lot of clout, but he wasn't going to call Sid Sheinberg up, the head of MCA Universal, and say, Sid, you're a fucking moron. What the hell are you talking about? We've been working with Back to the Future. This is the title that we all prefer. We're not calling this Spaceman from Pluto. It's just not going to happen. No, he doesn't do that. He shares with Zemeckis and Gale this absurd information that they might not be able to use Back to the Future as their title, which certainly by that point, in their minds, it was 100%. This is what we're going with. Because there are plenty of stories out there of movies which started with one title, ended with something else. I mean, Edge of Tomorrow was All You Need Is Kill. I believe that was the working title, All You Need Is Kill. Annie Hall, the working title was, one of them, Manhattan Murder Mystery. There are other stories and cases of films that had working titles which ended up having nothing to do with it. Hell, Dirty Harry was called Dead Right. That was the name of the book. Early drafts of the screenplay were Dead Right. They wanted Back to the Future, and Sid Sheinberg said, Spaceman from Pluto. So Steven Spielberg, not really a conventional risk taker, maybe cinematically, but in terms of dealing with personalities, not a polarizing figure, not a controversial figure like a Quentin Tarantino could be. So filming wrapped. Zemeckis is working on editing the movie. They had a release date and all this. And Spielberg decides he's going to roll the dice, and he's going to play a little poker with the head, the chairman of MCA Universal, Sid Sheinberg. He writes Sheinberg a memo. He says, Sid, I'm happy that you're enjoying all of the footage that you've seen for the movie, and the finished product is going to be even better. But I wanted to say and thank you for giving the cast and crew the biggest laugh we've had since the start of this crazy production when you joked with us that the title of the movie was going to be Spaceman from Pluto. And that was it. And Spielberg closed the letter, sent it away. When Sid Sheinberg read that letter, he was presumably mortified. Spielberg had not even given him the time of day. He, in his mind, Spielberg assumed that Sheinberg was playing a joke. That this title, Spaceman from Pluto, was so stupid. There's no way you were serious, Sid. We know you were just joking. Everybody knows that this movie is going to be Back to the Future. So Sid Sheinberg did not answer Spielberg's letter. He said nothing. Steven Spielberg took that as, okay, we're good. And that was it. The title of the movie, Back to the Future. It hit its release date, and it was an immediate, huge box office hit. And it's very successful with critics, a lot of award, nominations in different kinds of categories. And it did well enough where because if at the end of the movie, to be continued. Now, you can say stuff like to be continued, but if a film doesn't make it, you're not going to get a sequel. But they were confident when they wrapped that we're going to be able to turn this into a franchise. And that's exactly what happened. The first movie was an enormous hit, and they were able to get most of the cast except the actress who played Jennifer Parker. There were some issues, and Elizabeth Shue took over in Back to the Future Part 2. And Crispin Glover thought that he was kind of being monkeyed around with and I guess underpaid. He didn't want to come back for Back to the Future 2. But Back to the Future 2 is a movie which I didn't like when I first saw it. I didn't even see it in theaters. I actually saw it on the plane. What the late, great Roger Ebert, my favorite film critic, always said, the worst place to watch a movie on the plane. Don't watch a movie on the plane if it's going to be something you're really looking forward to. It's not going to work for you. Well, Roger got that right. So I saw Back to the Future 2 on the way to Florida in, I think, 1989. It could have been early 1990. Didn't like it. Felt like a rehash of the first movie, just with some kind of dirty, nasty angles to it. Didn't like it. That movie plays much better now. It's a film that it's sharper on repeat viewings. It didn't hit me right the first time I saw it, and I've revisited it, and I was like, okay, it's not as good as the first one, but it's terrific. Now, Back to the Future 3, I saw in theaters with my dad and sister when it opened, summer 1990. That was a good summer for movies. That was a summer of Die Hard 2, which I absolutely adored. Even Andrew Dice Clay, the notorious Andrew Dice Clay, Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Terrific. Same filmmaker, Rennie Harlan. Imagine a guy directing two big studio tentpole, at least in theory, Ford Fairlane didn't work, movies in the same summer. Dick Tracy, another movie I really loved from that summer. But I saw Back to the Future 3 in theaters with my dad and my sister, and I really liked it. Again, not as good as the first one, but a terrific conclusion to the saga. And I'm glad they did not make any more Back to the Future films. I felt like a trilogy was perfect. And, history has kind of redeemed Back to the Future 2. It's much better than I remembered. I was almost in shock. I watched it again about, 3-4 years ago. And I was like, man, this is way better than I remember. Like I actively disliked it and did not see it for a couple of decades at least. But all three films were successful, and it became this franchise, and now I know it's on Broadway. I'm not sure if it's a musical or just, a theatrical representation. But because of Michael J. Fox's health issues, we do have to keep in mind that it couldn't have helped. He probably started to feel the effects of the Parkinson's sooner than he otherwise would, but he has no regrets. And I love the fact that his autobiography is called Lucky Man, that despite, like in the Lou Gehrig way, I've been given a bad break, but I consider myself the luckiest man in the face of the earth. And Lou Gehrig died, how old was he, 41, 42 when he passed? Michael J. Fox is still going. He's still here. He's 61, 62 now. I hope he has another couple of decades. And he's certainly not throwing any of it back. But, seeing him in such a state, it is sad because to many of us, especially Gen Xers, he'll always be Marty McFly. He'll always be Alex P. Keaton. And, man, I just love Back to the Future. I got to go to the, 38th anniversary screening last October with my good pal Kenny, may he rest in peace. We saw that screening together with his daughter. With Kenny's daughter, that is. What a great experience to see that movie on the big screen for the first time. I'd always only seen it at home, HBO, or in later years, Netflix or Amazon Prime. But a great movie, and if you've never seen it, what are you waiting for? I don't know anybody, not one person, who has ever told me, I hate Back to the Future. Nobody. It is almost universally loved and beloved, largely due to its star, Michael J. Fox. And with that, we have reached the end of episode 58 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all once again for joining me for the Back to the Future episode. And if you're doing so and have done so on the YouTube channel and haven't clicked like and subscribe, go ahead and click like and subscribe and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 59 real soon. Take care.